Who gave you the call that you were getting a tryout for WWF?
Billy Gunn. So here's a cool story. I finagled my way into an audition with WCW. At the time, they were taping, this is in early 96. They were taping television at either MGM or Universal. And I got the audition and I was the yay boo guy. So I'm the one who's telling the people to cheer, to boo. It's a lot of fun. It was 3 days, I think, and it was just a whole bunch of matches, one after the other. And I didn't know whether anything was going to come of that. I had also talked to Billy Gunn because I saw that in May or June, there was going to be a run of house shows in Florida. And at the time, they weren't bringing like a Howard Finkel or flying somebody down. I said, if they're hiring a local ring announcer, please let me know. He said, I will ask for you. Okay. And I got a page. That's how long ago this was, my pager. And I recognized the number. So I went and called him on the payphone in between shows. And as soon as he started talking, I was like, oh, must be about the house show loop and getting a ring announced. He says, Kevin, you have to call Bruce Pritchard right now. Okay, why? He says, they want to bring you up for an audition. I'm thinking, an audition for a ring announcer? I don't say that. Okay. And he gives me the number. And I said, thank you very much. He says, yeah, they want to bring you up for a tryout for TV. What? So I call Bruce. And Bruce, Kevin Kelly, hey, nice to talk to you. What are you doing? I'm actually in between shows at WCW. What are you doing? I said, I'm warming up the crowd. It's my audition. You haven't signed a contract, have you? No, they haven't offered one. Hogan there? God, no. All right. Then he says, we found your tape. We found your tape. We found your number. Billy Gunn had talked to me about house shows and whatever, but I've had this tape on my desk for a couple of years, and it was an old phone number, and we've been looking for you because Vince wants to step away from the microphone, wants to go back behind the scenes, produce, et cetera, et cetera. So we're looking for another announcer to fill in. JR would kind of be stepping up, so that would mean those syndicated shows, et cetera, et cetera. So I would love to try out. That would be awesome. And I went up on June 6th of 1996, and my first day was June 24th of 1996.
What you should have said was, when Bruce said, did you sign a contract? You should have said, it's right in front of me, Bruce, and it's got a lot of zeros in it.
A lot of zeros, brother. Yeah, I was just like, what am I doing? What world is this? I'm on the phone talking to the WWF. Will I work for WCW? I don't want to say I didn't want to work for the WWF, but I never thought I would, because I was always an NWA fan, a WCW fan. I lived in Florida. That's what I leaned more towards. And you grew up in the Northeast, and you gravitated more towards the WWF, of course. It was still regional in that regard. It was just the wrestling that you grew up with, even though we had WWF in Florida, and I saw Raw, but it was never my cup of tea. I didn't really care for Vince's vision of sports entertainment. And so when we started doing stuff in the Attitude Era, I was like, wow, we're really hot-shotting things. And it was fine. It was fun. It was a blast. But yeah, I didn't ever think that that far. When you ask the question, how did you do this? And there's one announcer, and I never really put too much thought to it. I just did it. And somehow it all worked out.
What was the tryout like? What'd you have to do?
So they flew me up Newark Airport, and the limo takes me to Stanford. I'm in the makeup chair. Jill Clark, who's still the dear friend, she's wonderful. She's doing my makeup. Kevin Dunn comes in and introduces himself, and I go downstairs, and I just an on camera in the studio. Talk about yourself a little bit, explain this. Then he kind of asks some questions that would be more not necessarily wrestling related, but what would you say in a situation like this? What might it sound like? Then he had a baseball bat leaning up against the set piece, and he said, here, take a minute and sell the bat. Yeah. So I looked, and I saw that Robin Ventura had it was a Robin Ventura autographed bat. So I talked about Robin Ventura's career at Mississippi State University, and that he had a 60 61 or 62 game hitting streak in college. Was one of the all-time greats, and he was currently he was, I think, still with the Chicago White Sox at the time. So I sold him and then said, if you want to be as great a ball player as Robin Ventura, get yourself one of these bats today. And then I interviewed Jim Ross, who was getting ready. This was a hell of a main event for Madison Square Garden. Jim Ross was going after Shawn Michaels in the WWF Championship. So I talked to JR, got his thoughts, asked a few questions, found him to be quite pithy. And so I castigated him for his salacious remarks about the Heartbreak Kid. And that was fun. And then Jim Ross and I went into the announce booth and we called 2 matches, I think, from Raw. One was Barry Horowitz and Yokozuna.
A main event anywhere in the country?
Main event anywhere, sold out, hanging from the rafters. I don't remember the second match, but I was just, that was that. I did okay. I didn't do great. One match I was the lead, and then the next match I was the color guy. And then they said, okay, that's it. And I opened up the door to go out the studio because I was sitting in this little booth by the door first. So I opened up the door and there's Lisa Wolf, who's the head of HR. And she hands me a Monday Night Raw t-shirt with the, the old logo, right, from the original show. And I was like, oh, this is the consolation prize for people that don't get hired. You get the fucking t-shirt. I was like, oh, great. Thank you very much, Lisa. I really appreciate it. And the car was there and we're heading back to the airport. We get 2 or 3 exits down 95 and the driver gets a call. What? Okay. And he hangs up and he pulls off the exit. They want you back. What? And I'm thinking, did they not record me? Was something wrong? And I said, what are we going back for? What is it? They want you to meet Vince. Okay. So we go back to the TV studio. And Lisa Wolf and Bruce Pritchard are there. And I hadn't met Bruce previously. We have decided that you're the one that we want to meet Vince. Okay. Because it was apparently like they had a casting call and there were several people that were trying out during the day. I have no idea who else.
A lot of t-shirts handed out that day, right?
There was a lot. And I was clutching that Monday Night Raw shirt. They weren't getting that back from me. And they said, but Vince is over in the tower and we're at the TV studio, so we'll get you a ride. And one of the production assistants drove me over to the tower and got me inside. I went up to the 4th floor and they led me to a little conference room and I'm just sitting there. Oh my God, what do I do? And I'm trying to think of like something to say and I'm Raw magazine and I'm flipping it and on the cover, it was the whole story about Kevin Nash and Scott Hall leaving. And I was, the loyalty. So, okay, I get that line. And then Vince comes in. How are you, pal? Nice to meet you. And he asked me one question. I think I talked for like 4 minutes, just threw up on his shoes, just like, I was so nervous. And I talked about being loyal and, if you gave me the opportunity, I would certainly be loyal to the company. And I was. And somehow after all of that nonsense, I wound up getting the job.
All right, let's back up a little bit. You mentioned a lot of big names in our last go around. Thoughts on
Barry
Kevin
Horowitz? Dunn? Yes, Barry Horowitz.
Oh man! See, on the 14 times I sent you a message, I told you we'd have fun doing this.
I know, right?
Right?
I thought this was going to be all about you, to be honest. I really did. Why didn't I ever get hired? I don't know. Why? When you booked me that one time and I was here, and how come I didn't get to wrestle? I don't know. When we went to catering and that one time, why was the chicken like so dry? I don't know.
Awesome. Thoughts on Kevin Dunn?
Well, I grew to not like him instantly. Once I got hired, I realized, oh, okay, this guy doesn't like me. I was there, I think, a week, and I noticed that my name was spelled differently because I had just always written it just to be different, Kelley, just to be different. And then I noticed it was Kelly on a lower third. So I called up to Kevin and I just said, I just have a question about the name. And he got real offended about that. Okay, whatever. And then I went out to lunch with Bruce at some point and we were talking and he said, yeah, that the 2 people, the 3-person committee The two people that voted for you was myself and Lisa Wolf, and the one who voted against you was Kevin Dunn. And now I'm reporting to Kevin Dunn. So he never liked me. And he was a creep and just, ugh. And after a year, I had a 1-year contract. He was not going to renew my contract. So I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next and had no idea. He called Vince McMahon at his house. And this I know from Vince Russo, who told me because he was there. And I had already started to do some stuff writing on the magazines and helping out with the AOL site because I was just bored. I was doing nothing and it was dumb. What am I doing here? And they made me be there all the time. They made me move up my family from Florida. And it's like, for what? So anyway, Kevin Dunn calls up Vince McMahon and says, I'm going to let Kevin Kelly go. And Russo said Vince's expression was very telling because he took down his glasses and made the face like, huh? Well, why, pal? Well, I kind of stammering around for an answer. And Vince Russo says, well, he's been writing for me on the magazines and doing stuff with AOL. Can I have him? Yo, sure, you can have him. That'd be great. Well, listen, I got to go, guys. I'll talk to you later. And that was it. So I got let go from my television contract and then went over to the tower and worked on the magazines. And then probably 2 or 3 months later, I got a call from Kevin Dunn's assistant, and everybody else at the TV studio was great. I had no problems with anybody there. They were all fantastic people. Just he was like, Kevin Dunn was a jerk. Vince and Kevin Dunn want to meet with you. Okay. And I go back over and Vince says, I want you to be on Raw, pal. I want you to call the first hour, you and Michael Cole. They had already hired Michael Cole to replace me. And I found that out when Cole and I rode together, I think to State College or some Northeast town, but we drove instead of flying. And we bonded in the car and found out that, yeah, he was hired to replace me. And then he and I wound up working together, and we always got along great. So it was a lot of nervous stomach moments and, fearful of what a 29-year-old guy with a meaningless communications degree from Florida State University and nothing on his resume was going to do if he got let go in Connecticut from a job that he was only at for a year and had nothing else on his resume. What was I going to do? So luckily it all worked out and I wound up learning a lot over 7 years.
Thoughts on Jim Ross?
I always felt bad for JR because he was burning the candle at both ends. He had his full-time responsibilities with talent relations, and he has full-time responsibilities of doing Raw and the pay-per-views and everything else. And of course, all day long, he's doing his talent relations stuff while at the same time preparing for Raw. And he was tired a lot and grumpy a lot. And I understood why. And then I worked for him in talent relations from, 2001 to 2002. It was a year plus. And I saw that firsthand, about how phone's ringing and it's Vince and he's got to go meet with Vince and then, get home in time and try to eat some dinner and have a life. And then he's going to be gone 4 days and then come home. And, it was a lot. And that's why eventually he just said, I just want to go home to Oklahoma. I don't want to deal with this anymore. Because it was a lot. The head of talent relations is the heat spot, and having to negotiate contracts and do all of that. It wasn't just booking the house show lineups. It was a lot of meetings with attorneys and heads of departments and things like that. So yeah, it was tough, but he was a good boss. I learned a lot from him, both on the talent relations side and on the announcing side. He taught me some important lessons, like give every match a reason for being in the ring before they lock up. And if you can't summarize all of what is leading to this match, then it's not a good match. But if it can be simple, make it as simple as possible. Two men who are vying for the, richest prize in the game, getting set to go one fall to, we'll see who can win, as they circle and lock up. That's something I always took away. And then the key of speaking in sound bites for television. So brevity, the soul of wit. And that was some of my experience with JR, and then getting to catch up with him most recently at AEW was a lot of fun after all all the years of not having seen him and being able to catch up with him and thank him for everything he had done.
What was Vince McMahon like as a boss?
He was
And
great.
Yeah?
He never yelled at me once.
Was he in your ear at all?
Yeah. And he
Yeah.
never yelled at me. He would tell me occasionally, just relax, pal. You know, because I'd come, man, I was shot out of a cannon when we'd start, of course, and would help me settle down. Occasionally, he'd give me a line, and I would do my best to try to fit it in. And if I didn't, one time he asked me, "What about the line I gave you, pal?" I couldn't make it work, Vince. I'm sorry. But he didn't yell at me. He yelled through me one time. He was yelling at the pre-tape crew not being ready to shoot an interview with him. So I'm standing there, he's standing there, the pre-tape crew isn't ready, and he looks at me and he says, "What good is an announcer without a microphone, pal?" None at all, Vince. You know, as the guys are quickly putting the microphone on the end of the wire. But he was cool. He gave me the directions to one of the first things I did was Sunday house show Cleveland. We were recording an element that was going to go into Raw, and it was a backstage fight between Brett and Stone Cold. So I interviewed one of them, and then I interviewed the other, and then I think I interviewed Brett first, and he went back in his locker room. Then I interviewed Steve, and Steve said, "Is that Bret Hart's locker room?" "Yeah, he's right in there." And then Steve goes blowing in the door, and they wind up having a big pull apart. But we recorded that on Sunday at a Sunday house show, but it was supposed to be in the backstage of the Raw that was taped. So they put those pre-tape elements the next night. And he thanked me for that, and then sent me on my assignment to go interview Brian Pillman, and we met at his house. And he said, "You did a great job with that Steve Brett thing, so I know you'll do a great job here tonight."